You're connected to Business Wrap. Find us online at businesswrap.biz, on Twitter using handle AskBizWrap, and on Facebook, just search Business Wrap. And now, Work Matters with Julie Mann.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show that ponders. Does work really matter? And if it does, why? On this show, we ponder all kinds of things that impact work, and work is something that we know. We all do it a lot every single day. So let's figure out what it takes to make it matter, and let's talk to experts out there that can help us ponder different things and really think about how we make that happen. So I have to tell you, I am so thrilled because on the show today, we are having Ira Wolfe join us. And I could introduce Ira in about a million different ways, but we'll start with the basics. So he's the president and the chief Googlization officer. I passed test number 1. I said Googlization right, for a company called Success Performance Solutions. And not only is Ira, that's his job title and that's his company, but he really is a thought leader on change. He's an expert in the area of HR. He is passionate about change and the impact that it has on all of us, and then particularly in the world of work. So having him on the show is an absolute honor. I've become a fan of his overnight because he's written 6 books. And he has all kinds of really neat stuff to also look through on YouTube and his podcast as well. So, Ira, that's an intro, but welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks very much. It's a pleasure to be here as well. I love talking about this and big fan. So well, look forward to the conversation.
Well, here we go. So let's talk about, the title of your new book, which is Recruiting in the Age of Googlization. And I just think that even as a topic matter, Ira, I mean, that's really a lot to kind of put your mind around it. So let's kind of start about that. And what I really liked in your book is you talked about how it's a state where the art of recruiting meets the science of Google. So with that intro, I'm going to let you take that a little bit deeper. Go ahead.
No, I appreciate that. So the Googlization has been with me for actually, it's hard to believe, about 13 years at this point. A prior book I wrote was called Geek Skeezers in Googlization, and in that, if you rolled back the clock for anybody who was in the workforce back then, everybody was complaining about the millennials. We're still complaining about the millennials, right. But it was about the multiple generations, and we had baby boomers and Gen X, and at that point the millennials, and we also had the veterans or traditionalists, which is the oldest generation. But with that, we had this. Everybody was talking about the problem with people, the problem with the younger generation. And at the same time, what people were missing was this technology that was going on in the background. And, the iPhone hadn't even come out yet, or the iPad hadn't even come out yet when I wrote that, but the iPhone had just hit the streets. We started with mobile phones, broadband was still developing. We still had dial-up in many places. So the challenge was not only what I saw was not necessarily just the different generations in the workplace and the different approaches and the different mindsets, but also how technology was changing how we communicate, how we work, how we play, somewhere I came up with this term Googlization. I wish I could tell you I had this huge aha moment. I did have an aha moment, but I don't know what triggered it.
Right.
I think
Somewhere
it was just the research. Yeah, it was just the research for the book in the background, and then there was actually another book that was written by someone who wrote a book about Googlization too. But fortunately, I had claims to it first, and we're there. But yeah, so to summarize it, I mean, what Googlization was, it was really the convergence of what I called the tired, the wired, and technology. And most people excluded the technology or did one or the other. They talked about either technology as being this game changer, or they talked about generations, the young people, either millennials were the saviors or the problem. And now, that all gets pointed at Gen Z, although the millennials still get get blamed for everybody under 45.
Right, right. It's a very big group, right?
It's a very large group. They even get blamed for for Gen Z, which is, the youngest millennial. And I think this is important to point out there because I still hear it. I just had a conversation this morning, earlier today, And somebody said, yeah, well, what do you think about the millennials? And I said, you do realize the millennials are 42 years old.
Right.
The oldest.
Right.
They go, oh, no, not them. We're talking about like the kids in high school and college. And you go, they're not even millennials. I mean, at least get the generation straight.
Right.
Stop blaming them. So I also, one of the other titles I have, I also describe myself, people have described me as a millennial in a baby boomer body, because my body definitely is the baby boomer. It tells me that every day. But my mind's still, I'm still looking at growing, and people ask, when I had this conversation over the weekend with somebody in the family, and they said, so you're probably never going to retire. And I go,
what's that?
Right. I'm having a blast. I mean, I'm having a blast, and I got too many things that I want to continue to do yet. But one of the other titles that I had was I'm a recovering millennial basher, because I was pretty harsh on them when I wrote Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization. I was pretty harsh. Followed a lot of the stereotypes, and but.
Well, and don't they call you the millennial trapped in a baby boomer body?
Yeah,
I think I read that. Yeah.
Yeah, so I had to, I guess, save myself, but it really, I mean, I'm just fascinated. I work with so many, and again, when I say young people, I mean anybody under 50 is young anymore. But people, I'm in a couple groups, and everybody is between 25 and 40 years old, and sometimes I'm a mentor, sometimes I'm just a participant, and I'm just amazed at how many balls they're juggling, their vision for the future, the businesses that they're building, their mindsets and their attitudes. And they go, if you got a problem with millennials, you're hanging out with the wrong people.
Right. Yeah, because they're moving. They understand. And we'll talk about it in another segment. But they understand change, and they understand that you've got to keep at that pace. And from a tooling perspective. That Googlization is I love that term, because it's what's driving so much of that change, right? It's behind a lot of what we do, and we've got to accept that, right?
Yeah. But what you just said was so important. So many people miss it. You continue to hear people say that millennials, and again, and we're encompassing, everybody under 40 at that point.
Right.
But we hear so much that millennials can't communicate. They're stuck on their screens. Right. They expect everything fast. Well, when you give a 2-year-old, well, actually, we got a 1-year-old grandson.
Congratulations.
And he's got a model. I mean, it's not a real mobile phone, but he's got the smartphone. And he can press buttons, and it talks, and it does all these things. But when you look around and you see that every child has a tablet, and whether they're playing games on it, they're watching movies, they're listening to, Alexa. I mean, that's the world they grew up in, and they know that all they have to do is touch a screen and something comes on, it communicates them, it interacts, they get answers, they get responses, and then it's all of a sudden it's like, you're 18 years old, you have to be patient.
Right.
What's your hurry?
Right.
The only world they ever knew was fast and tech. And I was just, actually funny. I highlighted this in one of my own books. Sometimes it's like, boy, I was having a good day when I wrote that. But I talked about young people being, they were called screenagers.
Oh my gosh, is that a great term?
Attached to screens. And I wrote that 15 years ago.
Right.
I mean, it was like, wow, it's like I completely forgot about it. But everybody complains about the screenagers who. They didn't go out. I got to tell you, there's no 5-year-old, 4-year-old, 8-year-old, 10-year-old walking down the street and going to Best Buy or Verizon or AT&T and buying a mobile phone or a tablet.
Right.
The parents bought them.
Right, exactly.
Somebody bought them for them. They buy the software. They don't have credit cards to buy the apps. Somebody else bought them for them, and then all we do is complain about them.
Right, and why are you doing that all the time, right? Well, but the pace at which they're taking in information, I mean, I think that's what's so fascinating, is that the pace at which they take in information, And again, then when they get to work, right, they're used to taking it at a fast pace. They're used to processing fast. They're used to taking in new drips of information on a very constant and consistent basis and using that and modifying their thought process about whatever the topic might be. And so that pace of just even the intake valve, right, is just so fascinating and, really, I think, beneficial in the workplace, especially.
Well, it has to be. It is our world, and as much as I have a lot of colleagues and a lot of peers, especially baby boomers, and and a lot of Gen X, really. I mean, the other thing is you look at Gen X and they go, oh, they're still young. Well, the oldest Gen X is 55 years old.
right.
They're just a few years ago that was sort of, hey, I'm going to be 55. I'm going to take early retirement. Now it's like, oh yeah, those young kids. And it's crazy because many of the Gen X are still waiting to become leaders.
Mm-hmm.
They're waiting for the baby boomers to get out of the way.
Right.
So the generations are all screwed up. The whole model is very interesting to be able to talk about it. But going back to your original question, is the Googlization part, the technology, the pace at which technology is transforming us. Is mind-boggling. Mm-hmm. Even for me, who lives in kind of lives for that.
Right.
It is. There's just days saying I'm not sure I'm cut out for this anymore.
Right. So think about it. So if you're a business and you're listening in, and we're talking about kind of that Googlization space, what's the tip for? What's the tip for implementing that, or not implementing it? What's the tip for kind of engaging that mindset? Because I think a lot of it, as you work in the workplace, so much of it is mindset shift. And that's not easy. So it sounds easy, right? I'm just going to shift your mindset, right? It's not easy. But how does, what's a tip for that person listening in to say, step kind of one, to realize that Googlization is going on, to realize change is happening. Where do I kind of open that door if I feel that my pace isn't fast enough? And quite honestly, I would be very hard pressed to say many of those people listening, anybody has a pace that's fast enough. Like, who can keep up, really?
Humans can't keep up.
Right.
I mean, the pace of change, as fast as our brains.
Thank goodness for ML, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
That's one is it goes back to, and I wrote about this a little bit in the book, but I've recently interviewed a bunch of people on it doing my webcast and podcast, and we talked about the fixed or growth mindset. And your listeners may or may not be familiar with it, but there was a book called Mindset, and it was written maybe about 10 years ago by Carol Dweck. It's Dweck.
Yep.
I encourage everybody to, even if you don't want to read the book, just go up and Google it.
Right.
And there's a lot of articles, and they talk about fixed or growth mindset. Mm-hmm. And what the fixed mindset was, and I was a victim to this, and I think many of us were, that we learned that if you were smart and you can get all A's in school and you did well and you got your honors, then at some point you lose you lose the drive to try new things, to learn new things, because you don't want to look stupid, because the expectations are that you're super smart. And what would happen if you took a course, or you tried something, or you tried a new career, or you tried to do something, learn something new, and it wasn't easy for you, and it also, you didn't get an A, you weren't a top performer, you failed, you may have even failed on it, and you learned to protect your image. And you think about even, and she wrote this book about education, but then it got transformed into business as well. Mm-hmm. You think about what parents did. It's like, well, you need to go to this school because that'll get you into a better school, and you need to get, best grades. And if you didn't get the grades, the parents intervened, and you wanted to try something, but it was with a really hard instructor, and maybe you'd get a B, and that would screw up your 4.0 average. And
so don't do that.
and that carries on. I mean, you carry that into life. Is, you don't want to look stupid. You don't want to ask a question that makes you look dumb. Mm-hmm. You don't want to try something and make a mistake, and all of a sudden you're protecting your reputation. And that's a fixed mindset.
Yes.
Where a growth mindset is that there are no failures. There are failures, obviously. There's mistakes you make. But that's all they are. It's a mistake. And you learn from your mistakes and you go on. So you try something. And we lost that. I mean, we lost it. And we can, there's another thing we can blame the baby boomers for. But, a lot of people really were pretty hard on their kids. And you had to go to the best schools. And then that got carried down. And even in nurseries, even preschool, you had to get into a special preschool because they would help you, get the best grades. So it basically became this path of life that we want people to be perfect. And that was the exact opposite of what we should have been training our kids to do, is to become entrepreneurs and to be willing to make a mistake and develop a growth mindset and have lifelong learning.
Right.
I mean, it was continuous learning that, you're going to take some courses and, maybe you're not good in math. I mean, I'm going through that with my granddaughter right now. And she's in college and she's really struggling with math. Hey, I think I'm going to drop the course and I'm going to do this. And it's like, listen, it's not about getting your honors. I mean, we're proud of you when you get your dean's list and you get the perfect, she had a 4.0 last semester. But that's not the name of the game.
Right.
There are going to be struggles in life. And then I had an interesting text message conversation last night with her. Like at 11:30 at night.
Well, yeah.
She was stressed out because she wasn't getting an A.
Well, and I think that's, just to kind of to pull that together is that from a business standpoint of view, I think that, accepting that, it's okay to fail, right? Fail fast, prove value, feel fast, but it's okay to fail. It's okay to embrace that as a part of your culture because that means that we're innovating and we're in a time in the world where we've got to innovate, we've got to drive, we've got to change, and we've got to keep up. So all great stuff. So Ira, thank you so much for joining us today and talking about Googlization. We'll have to get back to the recruiting topic in another segment here. But for everybody listening, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate you listening in. And as I always say, let's impact today, let's transition tomorrow, and let's be sure we make work matter.